The sky above New York City did not look like the sky anymore. It looked like a highway. 50 years ago, humanity had looked up at the stars with a mix of existential dread and lonely longing. Now, the sky was cluttered with the traffic of a species that had finally kicked down the door to the Galactic Club and refused to wipe its feet. The shimmering diamond filament length of the Atlantic tether stretched up from the harbor, piercing the cloud layer like a needle through gray wool, carrying millions of tons of cargo and tourists to the orbital platforms every hour. Down on the street level, the air smelled of ozone, frying street food, and the copper tang of rain that never seemed to stop. Holographic advertisements 3 stories tall walked through the crowds, selling consumer-grade neural implants that promised to let you learn literary poetry in a week or taste colors like the Zal Tuan hive minds. Everyone was high on it. The arrogance was palpable, a thick, humid energy radiating from the pavement. We made it. The city seemed to scream. We are not alone, and we are open for business. But underneath the neon glare and the self-congratulatory noise, there was a nervous twitch, a silence that everyone noticed but no one acknowledged. On a wraparound news feed curving along the side of the Empire State Building, now a retrofitted heritage site dwarfed by the mega towers around it, a talking head with perfect teeth and violet eyes, likely a cosmetic mod, was laughing. "So the Galactic Council says the trade routes are open," the pundit said, his voice booming over the traffic. "But has anyone noticed that the real VIPs have not RSVP'd to the party?" The feed cut to a montage, a clip of a human diplomat, sweating under hot lights, asking a jagged, insectoid alien ambassador about the progenitors. The alien's mandibles clicked tight, its compound eyes dimming in what looked like biological panic, before it abruptly turned and walked away. Cut back to the pundit, the ancients, the architects, the old ones. Call them what you want, folks. They rule 50% of the known galaxy, yet they treat our solar system like a quarantined leper colony. Are they too snobby? Too evolved? Or maybe, just maybe, they took one look at our reality television and decided we weren't sentient enough to bother with. The pundit laughed. The crowd on the street laughed, but the laughter was thin. It was the sound of a child realized the adults were whispering about him in the next room. And the door was locked. Ethan Cole turned off the feed with a sharp gesture of his hand. The hologram flickering above his desk collapsed into static, then vanished. He sat in the center of a room that smelled of stale coffee and overheated electronics. It was a studio apartment in the literal sense. Half of it was a bed he rarely made, and the other half was a tangled nest of servers, microphones, and soundproofing foam. Ethan rubbed his face. He was 38 but looked 50. His hair was graying at the temples. A souvenir from the stress wars on the minor colonies of Mars. And his eyes had the permanent, shadowed look of a man who had seen too many things he could not unsee. He tapped the console on his desk. The on-air light turned a bloody warning red. "We are back," Ethan said into the mic. His voice was gravel over velvet, a voice that had narrated the fall of colonial governments and the rise of corporate fiefdoms. On the screen in front of him, a senator from the United Alliance was waiting. The man looked polished, confident, and utterly hollow. "Mr. Cole," the senator said, smiling, "as I was saying, the reluctance of the elder species to engage with Earth is simply a matter of protocol. They operate on timescales we cannot comprehend. 1,000 years is a blinking of an eye to them." Ethan leaned into the mic. He did not smile. "Protocol," Ethan repeated. "So, when the diplomatic corps sent a deep space probe to the Cygnus sector last month, and an ancient war moon gently pushed it back into slip space without firing a shot, That was just protocol? The senator blinked. That is classified operational data. It is leaked operational data, Ethan corrected. They do not want us out there. Senator. And they are not just ignoring us. They are avoiding us. Like we are walking down the street with a bomb strapped to our chest and they are crossing to the other sidewalk. You are fear-mongering. Cole. Humanity has never been safer. We have treaties. We have trade. Ethan cut the feed. He did not have the energy for the rehearsed soundbite. He killed the stream, leaving the senator's indignant face to dissolve into digital darkness. He swiveled his chair around, looking out the rain-streaked window at the glowing city. His producer, a disembodied AI voice named Lenny, chimed in through the room's speakers. Viewership spiked during the segment about the probe. Lenny noted, "But you look like hell, boss." "I feel like hell," Ethan muttered. He stood up, his bad knee from the Martian campaigns giving a familiar twinge of protest. He walked to the kitchenette and poured a glass of tap water that tasted vaguely of recycled filtration chemicals. Everyone is looking at the stars. "Lenny," Ethan said, staring at the lights of the orbital elevator climbing into the night. "They are all so desperate to be out there, to be part of the big happy family." "It is a natural impulse," Lenny replied. "It is a distraction," Ethan said. He touched the scar that ran across his ribs, a phantom memory of a decompression breach that had killed his squad and ended his marriage in the same terrible year. The real horror is not that the aliens will not talk to us. The real horror is what we did to ourselves just to get a ticket to the show. And I have a feeling the price was higher than anyone is telling us. High above the atmosphere, where the air was thin and the stars were hard, unblinking points of light, a ship docked at Orbital Station Prime. It was a Lithari vessel, sleek and teardrop-shaped, built of a white ceramic material that looked like bone grown in a lab. It clamped onto the rusted iron ring of the human station with a mechanical hiss. Inside the airlock, Sira Valen stood perfectly still. In her true form, she was a masterpiece of biological engineering. Her skin was a pale, violet-hued gray, translucent enough to show the faint, pulsing geometric lines of bioluminescence that traced her nervous system. She was tall, her limbs slightly too long for human standards, her movements possessing a fluid underwater grace. She closed her eyes. The mission parameters scrolled through her mind, not as text, but as a direct neural download from her handler. Target, Earth. Objective, investigate the anomaly. Reason, the Elders occupy a localized reality exclusion zone around the Sol system. They fear something. Hypothesis, humans are carriers. Sira exhaled, a sound like wind over a flute. She activated the biomorphic disguise unit embedded at the base of her skull. Pain washed over her. It was a cold, sharp sensation as her molecular structure shifted. Her height compressed. Her violet skin thickened and bleached into a sun-kissed human tan. The luminescent lines faded, burying themselves deep beneath layers of synthetic dermis. Her facial structure cracked and reformed, cheekbones softening, jaw rounding. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer Sira Valen of the Lithari Commonwealth. She was a human woman. Beautiful, yes, but in a messy, biological way. High cheekbones, dark hair that fell in loose waves, and a mouth that looked ready to smile or curse. Only her eyes remained strange. They were too bright, a shifting hazel that seemed to catch light where there was none. "Do not get involved." Her handler's voice echoed in her memory, a psychic imprint. Humans are emotionally volatile. They leak psychic energy like a cracked reactor. Do not let them contaminate you. Sira stepped forward. The airlock cycled, and the smell of earth hit her, sweat, machine oil, and raw, chaotic life. She practiced the expression she had studied in the archives. She lifted the corners of her mouth. It felt tight, unnatural. "Showtime," she whispered, testing the clumsy flat shape of the human tongue in her new mouth. 2 days later, Sierra was standing on the rooftop of a tenement building in the Neos Viridia district. The rain had paused, leaving the city slick and reflecting the neon red of a ramen shop sign across the street. She had rented a compact apartment that smelled of lemon cleaner and previous tenants. It was horrifyingly small. Humans lived in boxes, stacked on top of other boxes, surrounding themselves with clutter. She looked at her reflection in a puddle of water on the roof. She tried to frown. Her eyebrows knit together, but the expression looked more like a spasm than displeasure. "Sadness," she commanded herself. She drooped her eyelids and lowered her lip. She looked like she was having a stroke. "Humor," she tried next. She bared her teeth and squinted. In the reflection, she looked like a predator preparing to bite the throat out of a prey animal. "Close enough," she decided. She checked her internal chronometer. The target, Ethan Cole, was scheduled to speak at the Pan-Galactic Media Summit in 3 hours. Her handlers had identified him as a nexus point, a human whose chaotic probing into classified data was creating ripples that the Lithari intelligence algorithms had flagged. He was dangerous, not because he had a weapon, but because he was pulling at a thread that the entire galaxy had agreed to leave alone. Sierra adjusted the collar of her jacket. It was a human garment, synthetic leather, stiff and uncomfortable. She missed the flowing silk mesh of her homeworld. She missed the silence of the telepathic commons. Here, every mind was a closed room, shouting behind a locked door. The noise of the city was deafening to her sensory dampeners. She walked to the edge of the roof and looked down at the street, 50 stories below. "Why are you so scary?" she asked the teeming millions of humans below. "What did you do that made the gods hide?" The Tech Media Conference was held in a massive glass-walled convention center that floated on anti-grav pontoons in the bay. It was a temple to human vanity. Ethan Cole stood on the stage, the spotlight blinding him. He hated these things. He hated the corporate shills in the front row, the tech bloggers in the back, and the smell of desperation that came off the startup founders in the hallway. But he needed the money. The studio rent was due, and Lenny's server costs were skyrocketing. "So, let us talk about the great galactic lie," Ethan said, pacing the stage. He wore a rumpled blazer over a t-shirt, a deliberate visual middle finger to the suits in the audience. "We are told we are partners. We are told we are welcome. But have you tried to get a visa for the core worlds? Have you tried to access the history files of the precursor era?" He stopped at the edge of the stage, peering into the dark auditorium. You get a frantic file-corrupted message, every time, across 5 different alien networks. "Now, I am just a simple reporter from Chicago, but where I come from, if everyone agrees to burn the same book, it is usually because that book has the names of the people who started the fire." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the room. Ethan checked his watch. He had 5 minutes left. Time to wrap it up with a platitude and get to the open bar. "Questions?" he asked. A hand went up in the 3rd row. The spotlight swung, illuminating a woman. Ethan blinked. She was stunning, in a way that felt aggressive. She sat with a posture that was perfectly straight, her dark hair pulling back from a face that was sharp, intelligent, and unsmiling. But it was her eyes that caught him. Even from this distance, under the harsh stage lights, they seemed to be illuminated from within. "Yes?" Ethan said, shielding his eyes. The lady in the black jacket. She stood up. She did not fidget. She did not clear her throat. "Mr. Cole," she said. Her voice was clear, carrying without the need for the microphone that a runner was trying to hand her. "You speak of the bureaucratic barriers, but you have avoided the primary anomaly." Ethan cocked his head. "Which is?" "The oldest species," she said. "The architects, the high krill, the weavers. You claim the government is hiding the truth about trade deals, but your own leaked documents from the Mars databanks, the ones you published last week, contain 7,000 references to mining rights and 0 references to the elders." The room went deadly quiet. She continued, her gaze locking onto his. "Why is it that in a database of 10 million files, the specific search term for the dominant power in the galaxy returns a null set? That is not a cover-up. Mr. Cole, that is a quarantine. Why are you afraid to say that we are being ignored because we are feared?" Ethan felt a cold prickle of sweat on his neck. He had asked himself that question 100 times, but hearing it said out loud, in a room full of people, felt like someone had just armed a grenade. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, forgetting his stage persona. She smiled. It was a small, tight smile that did not reach those strange, glowing eyes. "Just a curious subscriber," she said. She sat down. Ethan stood there for a second too long, the silence stretching until it became awkward. He cleared his throat. "Well," he said, forcing a chuckle, "if I knew why the gods were ignoring us, I would be charging a lot more for this seminar." The audience laughed, relieved to have the tension broken, but Ethan did not laugh. He watched the woman in the third row. She was not clapping. She was watching him, dissecting him. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt like the story was hunting him. After the panel, the backstage area was a chaos of technicians coiling cables and speakers congratulating each other on their metrics. Ethan grabbed a bottle of water from the craft services table and downed half of it in one gulp. His hands were shaking slightly. He told himself it was just the caffeine. "Mr. Cole." He turned. She was there. Up close, she was even more disorienting. She smelled of rain and something else, something metallic and sweet, like electricity. "You certainly know how to kill a room," Ethan said, screwing the cap back onto his water bottle. "I prefer to think of it as waking a room up," she replied. Ethan leaned against a crate of audio equipment, crossing his arms. "I did not catch your name." "Sarah," she said. "Sarah Vale. I am a data analyst. Freelance." "Right," Ethan said. "And I am the Queen of England. You do not talk like a data analyst." "Sarah, you talk like someone who is used to giving orders, or taking very specific ones." Her eyes narrowed slightly, a microscopic shift in her pupils. "You are observant. It is the job description," Ethan said. "Look, nice question out there. But if you are looking for a job, I cannot afford you. And if you are looking for a source, I am tapped out." "I am not looking for a job," Sarah said. She took a step closer. She moved with a silence that was unnerving. One moment she was 3 feet away. The next she was within his personal space. Yet he had not heard her boot touch the floor. "I am interested in what you are not publishing," she said. "The things you keep in the dark because they do not fit the narrative of the cynical reporter fighting the system." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. It was an instant, biological alarm. Danger. His hindbrain screamed. Predator. But layered over the fear was a pull so strong it made him dizzy. It was gravity. She was looking at him not like a man, but like a puzzle she intended to solve, and the intensity of her focus was almost narcotic. You are dangerous. Sarah Vale, Ethan said, his voice dropping to a lower register. Is that a problem? She asked. Ethan let out a short, dry laugh. In my line of work, it is usually a requirement. But seriously, who are you working for? Intelligence? Corporate espionage? Let us say I am an independent party concerned with the same questions you are, she said. And I think you know more than you said on that stage. Ethan stared at her. He wanted to tell her to get lost. He wanted to ask her to dinner. The conflict paralyzed him for a second. Maybe I do, he said. Maybe I just do not like sharing with strangers who have eyes that look like they could X-ray my soul. Sarah tilted her head. She was analyzing his pheromones, cortisol levels spiking, pheromones indicating attraction mixed with defensive aggression. Humans were fascinatingly messy. I will be around. Mr. Cole, she said. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the wings before Ethan could think of a reason to stop her. He let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Jesus, he muttered to the empty air. That night, the rain had returned with a vengeance, hammering against the single window of Ethan's apartment. He was sitting at his desk, the blue light of his monitors washing over his face. He was trying to edit the audio from the conference, but he kept scrubbing back to the QA section, to her voice. That is not a cover-up. That is a quarantine. A chime from his secure terminal broke his concentration. Ethan frowned. That terminal was an air-gapped system he used for dead drops. It only pinged if someone physically plugged a drive into the encrypted receptor box he kept taped under a park bench in Central Park. He opened the channel. The file was small, text only. The header was garbled, but the source code signature belonged to Marcus Wren, a source Ethan had in naval intelligence. Ethan froze. Marcus Wren had died in a hovercar accident 3 weeks ago. This is a ghost drop, Ethan whispered. A contingency file, set to release if Marcus stopped entering his daily check-in code. He decrypted the file. It unspooled on the screen, a fragment of a military telemetry log dated 30 years ago. Clearance, ultraviolet location, Sector 7 redacted event, Nemesis output. Spike status, critical target, unknown biological entity result, entity withdrawal, total silence. Below the log was a handwritten note, digitized. Ethan, if you are reading this, I am gone. The silence isn't political, it's trauma. Look for Nemesis. Do not let them find you. Ethan stared at the word, Nemesis. It sounded like a weapon. It sounded like a judgment. Across the city, in her pristine, empty apartment. Sarah Valen sat in a lotus position on the floor. Her eyes were white, rolled back in her head. She was interfacing with the local data grid through her implant. She saw the packet move. She saw Ethan Cole open it. She saw the keyword flare in the digital ether, Nemesis. Sarah snapped back to reality. Her chest heaved. The keyword had triggered a warning flag in her own Litheri database, a blocked file that required council-level authorization. He has it, she said to the empty room. He found the thread. She stood up, moving to the window. The city lights blurred through the rain. Time to go to work, she said. They met 2 nights later. Ethan had not called her. He did not have her number. But he had mentioned on his stream that he would be at the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar in the lower districts, for a meet and greet that usually involved him drinking alone while fans stared from a distance. It was a Tuesday, so the bar was quiet. Low jazz played from a speaker that had seen better days. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of old beer. Ethan was in a booth in the back, nursing a whiskey. He was looking at a tablet, the word Nemesis glowing on the screen. the booth seat depressed opposite him. Ethan looked up. Sarah Vale was sliding in, wearing a trench coat that looked too expensive for this zip code. "You have a bad habit of sneaking up on people," Ethan said. He did not turn off the tablet. "And you have a bad habit of sitting with your back to the door." Sarah replied, "Strategic error." She signaled the bartender without looking, holding up 2 fingers. 2 more of whatever he is having. She looked at the tablet. "Nemesis? Sounds ominous." "It is Greek," Ethan said. "The goddess of divine retribution. The one who punishes hubris." "Fitting," Sarah said. She leaned forward. The booth was small. Her shoulder brushed against his. Ethan felt the contact like a static shock. He shifted, trying to maintain professional distance. But the air in the booth suddenly felt very thin. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Her skin was flawless. But there was a tension in her jaw, a vigilance in her posture. She held her drink glass with a grip that could crush it. "Why are you here, Sarah?" Ethan asked quietly. "And do not give me the curious subscriber line. You knew where I would be. You knew I was looking into this. I am here because you are going to get yourself killed," Sarah said. Her voice dropped, losing the playful banter. "You are poking a sleeping dragon, Ethan. The military scrubbed those files for a reason." Ethan laughed, a bitter sound. "And let me guess, you are the guardian angel sent to stop me?" "No," Sarah said. She looked down at his hand resting on the table. She had an urge, a sudden, inexplicable alien urge, to touch his skin, to feel the heat of a biology that burned so much faster and hotter than her own. "I am the one who wants to make sure that if you wake the dragon, we are not standing in the fire." She looked up, locking eyes with him. "We?" Ethan asked. "You need help," Sarah said. "You have the instincts of a reporter, but you lack the tools of a spy. I have resources. I can decrypt the layers you cannot reach." Ethan studied her. He took a sip of whiskey. The burn felt grounding. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. He could smell that strange electric scent again. It was intoxicating. "You know," Ethan murmured, half serious, half drowning in the intensity of her gaze. "If I did not know better, I would say you are the one interrogating me." Sarah felt her heart, her single, slow-beating, lithery heart, stumble in its rhythm. The proximity of him, the raw, unfiltered emotional radiation coming off him, suspicion, desire, grief, hope, was overwhelming. It was like standing next to a blast furnace. She should pull back. She should terminate the contact. Instead, she smiled. It was a real smile this time, small and dangerous. "Maybe I just like the way you lie, Mr. Cole," she whispered. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and charged. Ethan stared at her, his mouth slightly open. The sarcasm died in his throat. For a second, the noise of the bar faded away. There was just the table, the glowing screen, and the woman who was offering him the key to the abyss. "Deal," Ethan said, his voice rough. Sarah returned to her apartment an hour later. She stripped off the wet trench coat and threw it on the floor. She paced the small room, her mind racing. She touched her lips. She could still remember the proximity of his face. She opened her private log, the holographic interface shimmering in the dark room. Mission log, Day 4. Operative Sarah Valen. Status contact established. She hesitated. Her hand hovered over the input field. She recalled the heat of his shoulder against hers. The way his eyes had looked at her, not with the awe of a lesser species, but with the challenge of an equal. Subject: Ethan Cole triggers unexpected emotional responses. She typed, the symbols glowing blue. She paused, then added, "Investigate further." She closed the log, standing alone in the dark, wondering if she had just begun the mission that would save her people, or the one that would damn them all. The apartment smelled of ozone, old paper, and the distinct salty chemical tang of dehydrated shrimp. Ethan Cole called it a home office. Sierra Valen, standing in the center of the room with the posture of a regal statue placed in a dumpster, called it a biohazard. "We need to dig into this," Ethan had said an hour ago, throwing his jacket onto a pile of books that threatened to topple over. Sierra had looked at the floorboards, then at the ceiling. "Dig," she repeated, testing the word. "You wish to excavate the foundation?" "I detected no subterranean anomalies when I scanned the building structure." Ethan stopped mid-stride, a half-unpacked server unit in his hands. He stared at her, then let out a laugh that sounded like a bark. "Metaphor. Sarah, a metaphor. It means we investigate. We pull the data apart until we find the bones." "Ah," Sierra said, nodding once. "Data excavation. I understand. Now." They were 3 hours into the collaboration. Ethan was hunched over his main console, 3 monitors glowing with cascading streams of blue and green text. Sierra sat on a stool she had dragged next to him. She sat too close. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. Human personal space was a bubble, a radius of about 2 feet where you did not enter unless you were family or a lover. Sierra was neither. She was 6 inches from his elbow. He could feel the heat radiating from her arm through her thin jacket. He could smell that scent again, static electricity and something floral, like night-blooming jasmine grown in a reactor core. It was distracting. It was maddening. "Move over a little, will you?" Ethan muttered, typing a command string that went nowhere. Sierra looked at him, confused. "The visual fidelity is optimal from this distance," she said. "If I move, the parallax error on the side monitor increases by 4%. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just trust me. It is making me nervous." "You are perspiring," Sierra noted. "Is the temperature regulation in this unit defective?" She reached out, her cool fingers grazing his forehead before he could jerk away. The touch was clinical, yet it sent a jolt straight down his spine that had nothing to do with temperature. "I am fine," Ethan snapped, rolling his chair back a foot. "Just eat your noodles." Sierra looked down at the styrofoam cup in her hand. Ethan had prepared it by pouring boiling water over a brick of dried noodles and powdered mystery meat. She lifted a forkful of the curly, steaming substance and examined it with the intensity of a biologist dissecting a new species. "The sodium content in this single container exceeds the daily recommended intake for a human male by 300%, she observed. "This is not nutrition. This is slow suicide. It is dinner," Ethan said. "Try it." Sierra took a bite. She chewed slowly. Her eyes widened. "It is aggressive," she said. "That is the MSG," Ethan said, grinning despite himself. Sierra took another bite, then another, eating with a sudden rapid efficiency. "It stimulates the dopamine receptors," she said between mouthfuls. "I can see why your species finds this comforting. It tastes like salt and nostalgia." Ethan watched her for a moment, the blue light of the screens reflecting in her dark eyes. For a second, she looked less like a terrifying puzzle and more like someone just trying to figure out how to be a person. It made the knot in his chest loosen, just a fraction. "Back to the bones," Ethan said, turning to the screen. He brought up the file he had decrypted from the dead drop. The word Nemesis pulsed in the center of the screen. "I ran a cross-reference on the timestamp from the log," Ethan said, his voice shifting into narrator mode. 30 years ago. The official history books say the Seventh Fleet was conducting routine wargame maneuvers in the interstellar void between the Perseus Arm and our local cluster. And? Sierra asked. And the Seventh Fleet came back with 60% casualties, Ethan said. The official explanation was a catastrophic dark matter reactor failure in the flagship, causing a chain reaction. But look at this. He tapped a key. A schematic appeared, a fragmentation of a star chart. Reactor failures do not leave radiation signatures consistent with psionic backlash, Ethan said. And they certainly do not result in the sudden, immediate withdrawal of every diplomatic envoy from the outer rim. Sierra leaned in, her shoulder pressing against his again. This time, Ethan did not move away. She scanned the scrolling data. Her human eyes saw the text, but her neural implant was reading the meta tags hidden in the code, invisible to Ethan. She froze. There was a tag attached to the date, a sequence of numbers that she recognized, the day the galaxy went quiet. It was a phrase from her childhood history lessons in the Litheri creches, a day when the telepathic subspace channels used by the Commonwealth had simply ceased to function for 10 seconds. A universal silence. When the signal returned, the High Council had issued a new directive. Total avoidance of Sector Sol. Why? Ethan asked, seeing her stiffen. What do you see? Sierra pointed to a line of redacted text. These encryption keys, she said, careful to keep her voice steady. They are not human military standard. They are polyphasic. Alien? Ethan asked, looking at her sharply. Older, Sierra lied, though it was only a half-lie. This signature suggests that whatever the Seventh Fleet hit out there, it was not a reactor failure. They made contact. Ethan swiveled his chair, running a hand through his hair. Contact. With who? The Ancients? Or something the Ancients were watching? Sierra suggested. Ethan began typing furiously. If there was a contact event, there has to be a survivor, someone who was there and did not get their brain wiped. The military is good at erasing hard drives, but they are terrible at erasing people. He pulled up a list of discharged personnel from the Seventh Fleet, dated 30 years ago. Dead. Dead. Suicide. Accident. Dead. Ethan's face grimaced. They cleaned house. Wait, Sierra said. She pointed to a name at the bottom of the list. Dr. Aris Kwan, Chief Physicist, Project Nemesis. Status, medical discharge. Current residence, Black Ridge Observatory, Nevada. Ethan stared at the name. She is alive, he whispered. He stood up, grabbing his jacket. We are going to Nevada. It is 2 a.m, Sierra pointed out. Then we beat the traffic, Ethan said. But first, I need 2 hours of sleep or I'm going to drive us off a cliff. Do you need to recharge? Or whatever you do? I will monitor the data feeds, Sierra said. I require less sleep than you. Ethan looked at her, a strange expression crossing his face, a mix of gratitude and suspicion. Right, he said. Couch is yours if you want it. Do not eat all the noodles. He went into the alcove where his bed was, collapsing onto the mattress without taking off his jeans. Within minutes, his breathing evened out into the heavy rhythm of exhaustion. Sierra waited 10 minutes. Then she stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the city below glittering like a circuit board. Sierra closed her eyes and exhaled a long, shuddering breath. She triggered the mental command to relax her camouflage. The change was a relief, like taking off a corset made of iron. The human skin did not vanish, but it became translucent, ghost-like. Beneath it, the violet bioluminescence of her true form flared to life. Geometric lines of light pulsed along her neck and cheekbones, glowing in the reflection of the dark window. She looked alien, She looked beautiful and terrifying. She activated her implant, bypassing the local networks and punching through to the Lithari deep space relays. Query, Nemesis event, Sector Sol. Cross-reference with ancient activity. The data flooded her mind. It was heavy, encrypted, and dangerous. She saw the timeline. 30 years ago, the Lithari listening posts had detected a scream, not a sound, but a psychic shockwave that had propagated faster than light. And then, the correlation. Before that date, the ancients, the godlike entities that dwelt in the deep void, had been visible. They had massive structures near the galactic core. They communicated with the younger races, issuing orders, demanding tribute. After the date of the Nemesis event, they vanished. They did not just leave, they retreated. They pulled their megastructures into slipspace folds. They severed all communication. The official doctrine changed overnight. Obey the ancients became do not disturb the ancients. Sira opened her eyes, the glowing lines fading as she reasserted the human disguise. The humans did not just annoy the gods, she whispered to the empty room. They scared them. She looked toward the alcove where Ethan slept. He was shifting, murmuring something unintelligible into his pillow. She walked over to him, moving silently. She stood over the bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest. You are a biological impossibility, she thought. You are fragile, short-lived, and chaotic. How did you manage to terrify the masters of the galaxy? Ethan turned over, his hand flung out, brushing against her leg. Sira did not move away. She let him touch her, feeling the warmth of his unconscious contact. For the first time, her mission parameters felt wrong, neutralized the threat. But looking at him, she did not see a threat. She saw a man who was tired, looking for a truth that might destroy him. She sat on the floor beside the bed, watching him sleep until the sun began to turn the gray sky into a bruised purple. Morning came with the smell of burnt coffee. Ethan woke up with a groan, sitting up and rubbing his face. He saw Sira sitting on the couch, perfectly poised, reading a physical book she must have pulled from his shelf. You are awake, she said without looking up. Barely, Ethan croaked. He stood up, stretching. His back popped audibly. You talk in your sleep, Sira said, turning a page. Ethan froze, the coffee pot in his hand. I do not. You do, Sira corrected. You were arguing with someone named Sarah. You said, it is not the fall that kills you, it is the landing. Ethan turned away, focusing intently on the coffee machine. That was my ex-wife, he muttered. And it was a skydiving trip. She pushed me out of the plane. Metaphorically? Sira asked. Literally, Ethan said. She thought it would be therapeutic. It wasn't. He poured 2 mugs. He handed one to Sira. She took it, her fingers brushing his. Thank you, she said. Her voice was softer than usual. Ethan looked at her. The morning light caught the strange hazel of her eyes. For a moment, the investigative reporter was gone, and he was just a man standing in his living room with a woman who made his heart rate spike. We should hit the road, he said, his voice slightly hoarse. Nevada is a long drive. They took Ethan's car, a battered ground vehicle that ran on hydrogen cells and hope. The city gave way to the sprawl of the industrial zones, and then to the open desert. The sky rail tracks overhead cast long, rhythmic shadows across the highway. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the center console. Sira watched the landscape blur by. You know, Ethan said, breaking the silence. Most people think the aliens do not talk to us because we are violent. Is that not the prevailing theory? Sira asked. Ethan snorted. Please. Look at the Krogan Combine. They eat their own young for sport, and they have a seat on the council. No. I think it is something more embarrassing. Like, maybe we are the galactic equivalent of a reality TV show. We are too messy to interact with, but too entertaining to cancel. Sierra laughed. It was a genuine sound, a melodic chime that surprised both of them. You have a very low opinion of your species, she said. I have a realistic opinion, Ethan countered. We are loud, we are messy, we feel things too hard and we break things when we are mad. Maybe that is not a weakness, Sierra said softly. Before Ethan could respond, the car hit a patch of turbulence, a section of the road where the anti-grav stabilizers from the overhead rail were malfunctioning. The vehicle bucked violently to the left. Sierra's hand shot out. It was a reflex. She grabbed Ethan's forearm to steady herself. Her grip was shocking. It was not the grip of a human woman. It was like a steel clamp, unyielding and immensely powerful. Ethan fought the wheel, correcting the skid, bringing the car back into the lane. He slowed down, his heart hammering. He looked down at his arm. Sierra was still holding him. Her fingers were digging into his jacket. You have quite a grip there. Sarah, Ethan said, his voice tight. Sierra pulled her hand back as if she had been burned. Apologies, she said, staring straight ahead. Adrenal response. Ethan rubbed his arm. He could still feel the pressure of her fingers, the imprint of a strength that did not match her slender frame. Right, he said slowly. Adrenaline. The cabin felt smaller suddenly. The air was charged with a tension that was part suspicion, part something else. The silence stretched, heavy and thick, until Ethan turned on the radio, letting the static of a classic rock station fill the space between them. Black Ridge Observatory was a relic. It sat on a mesa, a white dome peeling in the desert sun, surrounded by a fence that had rusted through in places. They found Dr. Kwan in the main viewing room. She was a small woman, withered by time and what looked like a lifetime of looking over her shoulder. She was surrounded by analog equipment, star charts on paper, telescopes with glass lenses. She did not want to talk to them. Go away, she shouted when they entered. I have nothing to say to reporters. I signed the NDA. I signed it in blood. Dr. Kwan, please, Ethan said, holding up his hands. We just want to know about Nemesis. The name hit her like a physical blow. She backed away, knocking over a stack of books. Do not say that name, she shrieked. They will hear you. She was hyperventilating, her eyes darting to the shadows of the room. Sierra stepped forward. She moved differently now, slower, her movements rhythmic. She reached out with her mind, a subtle pulse of Lithari empathy. It was a forbidden technique on a non-telepathic species, but she did not care. Calm, she projected, safety, silence. Dr. Kwan's breathing hitched, her shoulders dropped. The frantic terror in her eyes dulled into a weary sadness. Who are you? Kwan whispered, looking at Sierra. A friend, Sierra said. We know about the scream. Doctor, we know about the silence. Kwan sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. It was not supposed to be a weapon, she sobbed. It was supposed to be a communication device. We wanted to say hello. Ethan knelt beside her. Tell us what happened. Doctor. Kwan looked up, her eyes haunted. We found them, she said. In the void, a presence. Massive, ancient. They were wrapping around the fleet, scanning us. It felt cold, so cold. The Admiral panicked. He ordered us to activate the array. Nemesis? Ethan asked. Project Nemesis. Kwan nodded. It was a psychic amplifier. It took the neural output of the crew, fear, aggression, panic, and focused it into a beam. We thought we were firing a warning shot. She began to tremble again. We did not fire a shot. Mr. Cole, we fired a scream. We took the raw, unfiltered chaos of the human mind and we blasted it directly into their consciousness. She looked at Sierra, her eyes wide. Do you know what human emotion feels like to a telepathic species? It is acid. It is fire. It is a virus that rewrites reality, and we didn't just hurt it. We showed it what we are, and it ran. It ran away screaming. The room was silent. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light coming from the open dome. Ethan stood up slowly. We weaponized our trauma, he said, his voice hollow, and we used it to mug God. Quan laughed, a brittle, broken sound, and now they stay away, not because we are too small, but because we are toxic. The drive back was a nightmare. A desert storm had rolled in, turning the sky black and unleashing a torrent of rain that hit the windshield like gravel. Ethan drove in silence, his knuckles white on the wheel. The revelation was sitting heavy in the car. Humanity wasn't the underdog. Humanity was the monster in the closet that the rest of the galaxy was trying to keep the door locked on. The rain became too heavy. The wipers couldn't keep up. I have to pull over, Ethan said. He steered the car into a rest stop, just a concrete overhang and a few vending machines glowing in the gloom. They got out of the car to stretch their legs, standing under the concrete shelter while the rain lashed the world around them. The air was cold, smelling of wet sagebrush and ozone. Ethan leaned against the wall, staring out at the storm. He looked defeated. I spent my whole career thinking we were the victims, he said quietly, thinking we were being excluded by a bunch of elitist aliens. He laughed bitterly. I was cheering for us. I was cheering for the thing that broke them. Sierra watched him. She saw the lines of pain around his mouth. She felt the radiation of his guilt. It was a heavy, dark frequency. She stepped closer. The rain misted against her face, threatening to disrupt her disguise, but she didn't care. You did not know, she said. It does not matter, Ethan said. It is in us. Sarah, that chaos, that acid. Maybe they are right to quarantine us. Maybe we are broken. Sierra reached out. She took his face in her hands. Her skin was cool, damp with rain. No, she said fiercely. Ethan looked at her, startled by the intensity in her voice. You are not broken, she said. You are loud. You are messy. You burn so brightly that it hurts to look at you. But that is not a defect. She ran her thumb along his jawline. The ancients are stagnant. Ethan. They have lived for millions of years in perfect, cold silence. Of course you scared them. You are alive in a way they have forgotten. Ethan stared at her. Her eyes were glowing, really glowing now. A faint hazel luminescence that defied the shadows of the storm. Who are you? He whispered. You are not your species' worst mistake, she answered. The distance between them vanished. Ethan moved first, or maybe she did. It didn't matter. His hands found her waist, pulling her against him, her hands tangled in his wet hair. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate. It was a collision. For Sierra, it was sensory overload. The taste of him, coffee, rain, and human warmth flooded her system. His emotions crashed into her mind, not as a weapon, but as a tidal wave of need and loneliness and desire. It was terrifying. It was intoxicating. She pressed closer, her body arching into his, feeling the solid reality of his chest against hers. She let out a sound. A low, vibrating hum that was not human, lost in the thunder overhead. Ethan held her like she was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. He kissed her deeper, seeking, asking a question he didn't have words for. For a moment, there was no mission, no Lethari council, no ancient threat, just the heat of him and the cold rain. Then, the alarm in Syrah's mind went off. Contamination levels critical. She gasped, pulling back. She stumbled, her chest heaving. She looked at Ethan. He was breathing hard, his lips swollen, his eyes wide and dark with desire. Syrah stammered. Her voice trembled. She was compromised. She had let the subject in. She had touched the fire. "I am sorry," she whispered. She turned and fled back to the car, leaving Ethan standing alone in the storm, the taste of electricity still on his tongue. That night, back in the city, Syrah locked the bathroom door of her apartment. She turned on the shower to mask the sound. She sat on the edge of the tub, shaking. She activated the encrypted thought link, Operative Valen reporting in the voice of her handler, warm and synthetic, filled her mind. Report, Operative. Syrah closed her eyes. She saw the rain. She felt Ethan's mouth on hers. She shoved the memory into a mental lockbox, intelligence confirmed. She projected. The subject has uncovered the Nemesis origin. The weapon was a psychic amplifier. It destabilized the ancients. There was a pause on the line, a silence that felt heavy. "And the humans?" the handler asked. "Do they possess the capacity to reactivate it?" Syrah hesitated. "The potential is dormant, but the biological capability remains." "Then the assessment is complete," the handler said. Their tone was cold, final. "If humans can touch the ancients, they are an existential risk to galactic stability." "Orders?" Syrah asked, though she knew the answer. "Secure the Nemesis proofs," the handler commanded. "Destroy the data, and prepare a contingency plan for the neutralization of the primary human carriers." "Carriers?" Syrah asked. "Anyone with knowledge of the weapon," the handler said. Starting with Ethan Cole. The link severed. Syrah sat in the silence, the sound of the shower drumming against the tiles. She looked at her hands. They looked human. But she knew what she was. She was a weapon, just like Nemesis. And she had just been ordered to aim herself at the only person who had ever made her feel real. She stood up and looked in the mirror. The human disguise looked back, pale and frightened. "I have to choose," she whispered. And outside, the city lights burned on, oblivious to the judgment falling from the stars. The digital map on Ethan's screen was a mess of static and corrupted topographic lines. But the coordinates were clear. They pointed to a location that officially did not exist. "It is listed as a decommissioned ore processing facility," Ethan said, tapping the screen with a stylus that had been chewed on the end. "Sector 9, orbiting one of Saturn's minor shepherds, a moon called Talos." He looked up at Syrah. She was standing by the window of his apartment, watching the morning traffic of drones and sky buses weaving through the smog. The tension from the previous night, the rain, the kiss, the sudden retreat, hung in the room like smoke. "There is no ore on Talos," Syrah said without turning around. "It is a ball of ice and silicate. It has no commercial value." "Exactly," Ethan said, "which makes it the perfect place to hide a black site lab that broke the galaxy." He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. "So, we go there. We find the physical drive. We get the proof. We should go now," Syrah said. She turned to face him. Her voice was a little too sharp, a little too eager. "There is a civilian transport leaving the orbital elevator in 3 hours. We can rent a short-range jumper from the Titan hub." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You are in a hurry." "I am efficient," she countered. Ethan stood up. He walked over to her. stopping just outside her personal space. He could see the faint fatigue in her eyes, the way her posture was rigid, as if she were holding herself together with invisible wire. "You know," he said, forcing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "A secret trip to a frozen moon base. If I didn't know better, I would say this is your idea of a romantic getaway. First date in a haunted house. Very avant-garde." Sierra looked at him. For a second, the mask slipped, and he saw the turmoil beneath. "It is not a date, Ethan," she said softly. "It is a grave robbery." Ethan's smile faded. "Right. Pack your bags, Sarah. Let us go see what buried secrets smell like." The journey to the Saturnian system was a study in claustrophobia. They took a commercial liner to Titan, a 14-hour transit where they sat in uncomfortable silence surrounded by miners and corporate contractors. Then, Ethan used a falsified press pass and a significant chunk of his dwindling savings to rent a Starling-class jumper, a ship that was essentially a cockpit, an engine, and a living quarter the size of a walk-in closet. As Earth shrank into a pale blue dot on the rear display, Ethan felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. He hated leaving the gravity well. Space felt too big, too empty, a vacuum waiting to swallow mistakes. Sierra, conversely, seemed to relax the further they got from Earth. She sat in the co-pilot seat, her hands moving over the rental's battered controls with a grace that made Ethan stare. "You fly like you were born in zero-G," Ethan commented, watching her navigate the debris field of the ring gap. "I have a good inner ear," Sierra said, not looking at him. The living quarters were absurdly intimate. There were 2 sleeping pods recessed into the wall, stacked vertically, but the aisle between the galley and the fresher was so narrow that they had to turn sideways to pass each other. 30 hours into the flight, Ethan was heating up a pouch of protein stew in the tiny microwave. Sierra was trying to fix a glitch in the nav computer, standing right behind him. "Excuse me," she said. "I need to access the panel behind your left shoulder." Ethan tried to press himself against the kitchenette counter. "You know, for a sophisticated alien conspiracy, you would think we could afford a ship with a hallway." Sierra reached past him. Her chest brushed against his back. The contact was fleeting, but it sent a shockwave through both of them. Ethan froze, the pouch of stew forgotten in his hand. He could smell her hair, that impossible scent of ozone and flowers. He turned his head. Her face was inches from his. She was looking at the panel, but her eyes were unfocused, her breathing shallow. "Sarah," Ethan whispered. She stiffened, then pulled back, retreating to the cockpit. "The navigation array is calibrated," she said, her voice tight. "We will arrive at Telos in 4 hours. Later, during a sleep cycle, the ship's ancient gravity generator hiccuped." Ethan was asleep in the bottom bunk, strapped in loosely. Sierra was in the top. The sudden loss of artificial gravity jolted the ship, sending loose stylus pens and a data pad floating into the air. Ethan woke up as he began to drift upward. At the same moment, Sierra, who had unbuckled to check a sensor reading, pushed off the ceiling to stabilize herself. They collided in the middle of the room. It was a slow-motion tangle of limbs. Ethan grabbed her waist to stop them from hitting the sharp edge of the galley table. Sierra's hands instinctively clutched his shoulders. They spun slowly in the air, a suspended waltz in the dim red emergency lighting. "Whoa. Easy." Ethan laughed, the sound breathless. Sierra was staring at him, her legs tangled with his. The absurdity of it, floating in a tin can millions of miles from home, broke the tension. She laughed, a sound that started as a giggle and ended as a genuine bell-clear release. "Our grace is impeccable," she said, her hair floating in a halo around her face. Ethan looked at her, suspended there, with no gravity to weigh them down. She looked ethereal. "I don't mind the view," he said quietly. Sierra's laughter died down, replaced by a gaze that was heavy and dark. She drifted closer, the momentum of their spin bringing their faces together. "Ethan," she whispered. The gravity generator kicked back in with a metallic slam. They fell. It wasn't a long drop, only 3 feet, but they landed in a heap on the floor. Sierra on top of Ethan. The wind knocked out of them. "Oof," Ethan groaned. Sierra scrambled off him, her face flushed. "I will check the generator," she said quickly, scrambling toward the engineering hatch. Ethan lay on the floor for a moment, staring at the ceiling, his heart hammering a rhythm that had nothing to do with the fall. He was falling for her, and he had the terrible sinking feeling that she was falling too. But she was trying desperately to grab onto a ledge that wasn't there. Telos was a dead world. The station was buried in a crater on the dark side, hidden from the prying eyes of the telescopic arrays on Titan. As they approached, the Starling's sensors painted a picture of desolation. The facility was a jagged scar of metal and concrete jutting out of the ice, powered down. Silent. "Looks welcoming," Ethan muttered as he piloted the ship into the manual docking bay, like a tomb with a parking lot. Sierra was scanning the structure with her eyes, seeing spectrums of energy Ethan couldn't imagine. "There is power," she said. "Deep down. A single subsystem is running." "Let me guess," Ethan said. "Life support?" "No," Sierra said. "The resonance lab." They donned their pressure suits, bulky, orange industrial gear that smelled of stale recycled air, and cycled the airlock. The station's interior was freezing. Frost coated every surface, glittering in the beams of their shoulder-mounted flashlights. Floating dust motes danced in the light like microscopic ghosts. Ethan checked his wrist comp. Atmosphere is thin but breathable, nitrogen-oxygen mix. But it is cold enough to freeze your breath before it leaves your mouth. Keep the helmets on. They walked through the silent corridors. The walls were lined with faded propaganda posters from the last war. Unity through strength. Silence is survival. Ethan shivered, and not just from the cold. "I keep expecting a jump scare," he said, his voice crackling over the comms. "You know, a zombie in a lab coat or a xenomorph dropping from the vents." "There are no biological signatures here," Sierra replied calmly. "Just us." "Right," Ethan said. "Just us and the ghosts with the non-disclosure agreements." They reached a heavy blast door marked Sector 4. Restricted. The panel was dead. Ethan pulled a decryption tool from his belt, a messy tangle of wires and a screen he had built himself. "Give me 10 minutes, he said. "This military encryption is tough." Sierra stepped past him. She placed her gloved hand on the panel. She closed her eyes. Under her suit, her implant flared. She pushed a code-breaking algorithm directly into the lock's simple electronic brain. The door hissed and groaned, sliding open with a shower of rust flakes. "Or we could do that," Ethan said, staring at her. "That works too. Remind me never to let you near my bank account." They entered the control room. It was a cavernous space, dominated by a central holographic tank that was currently dark. Consoles lined the walls, covered in dust. Skeletal remains of chairs sat in front of them. Ethan moved to the main terminal. He plugged in his deck, his fingers flying over the keys. "The core is still active," he said. "Low power mode. I am pulling the logs. Most of them are corrupted. Rot. Data decay. But there is a protected file. Massive. Play it," Sierra said. She was standing by the tank, her hand resting on the rim. She could feel the vibration of the station here, a low, throbbing hum that felt like a headache trying to be a sound. Ethan hit a key. The main screen above them flickered to life. The image was grainy, black and white, stamped with a date from 30 years ago. It showed this room. It was full of people, technicians in white coats, officers in gray uniforms. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and tension. A man in the center, Admiral Vance, Ethan recognized him from history tapes, was shouting, "Target is in range! The entity is enveloping the fleet. We have no kinetic effect. Repeat, kinetic weapons are useless." The camera panned to the main view screen in the recording. Ethan gasped. Outside the station, in the void, there was something. It wasn't a ship. It was a cloud of folding geometry, a massive bioluminescent shadow that seemed to be rearranging the stars behind it. It was beautiful and terrifying. "Activate Nemesis," the Admiral screamed. "Give it everything. Maximum gain." On the screen, the technicians threw switches, and then the sound began. It wasn't a sound on the audio track. It was a reading on the meters. The graph spiked into the red. "Subject sync at 100%, a technician yelled. "Channeling." The camera showed the crew. Suddenly, they weren't working. They were screaming. Some were weeping, tearing at their uniforms. Others were curled in fetal balls. The Admiral was clutching his head, blood running from his nose. The weapon wasn't firing energy. It was firing them. It was taking the terror of 300 people, amplifying it 1,000 times and blasting it out into the dark. Then, the static cleared. The entity on the screen recoiled. The massive geometric shadow seemed to shudder, retracting violently as if burned. A voice cut through the static. It wasn't human, it didn't speak English. But the station's universal translator decoded it in real-time text at the bottom of the screen. "It hurts. It is loud. You are sick. Stay away from the blue world." The recording cut to black. Ethan stood in the silence of the dead control room, his hands trembling over the console. "We didn't beat them," he whispered. "We threw up on them. We took all our pain, all our fear, and we forced them to feel it." Sierra was pale. Her human disguise flickered for a second, revealing the violet gray of her true skin before stabilizing. "To a species that communicates through pure thought," she said, her voice shaking, "human emotion is not just noise. It is a pathogen. It is chaos. You terrified them. Ethan, you terrified the gods." Ethan looked at her. "Is that why you are here? To make sure we don't scream again?" Sierra didn't answer. She was looking at a door at the far end of the room. A door that was heavily reinforced and marked with biohazard symbols. "There is something else," she said. "I can feel it." They walked to the door. This time, it didn't need hacking. It was unlocked, as if waiting. Inside was a circular chamber. In the center, suspended in a tube of amber fluid, was a human brain and spinal column, woven with fiber-optic cables. Ethan recoiled. Jesus! The speakers in the room crackled. "Hello, son of the signal," a voice said. It was synthetic, layered, echoing. Ethan froze. "Who are you?" "I am Nemesis," the voice said. "Or what remains. The echo." The AI, the ghost in the machine, pulsed with a soft blue light. "I recognize your genetic resonance. Ethan Cole. Your father was the calibration officer. He was the one who tuned the frequency. He was the one who screamed the loudest." Ethan stumbled back, hitting the wall. His father. The man who had come back from the war, a hollow shell. Who had sat in a chair staring at the wall until he died of a stroke. He never told me," Ethan whispered. "He could not." The AI said. His mind was part of the weapon. He left it here. Sierra stepped forward. She looked at the tank with a mixture of horror and fascination. "You are a biological interface," she said. "A storage drive for trauma." "I am a memory," the AI corrected, "and I am lonely." Sira placed her hand on the glass of the tank. "I feel you, traveler," the AI said. "You are not of the blue world. You are of the quiet ones, the ones who hide." "I need to know," Sira said. "I need to know what you did to the ancients." "See," the AI commanded. A surge of psychic energy lashed out from the tank. It hit Sira like a physical blow that she gasped, her back arching, her eyes rolling back. "Sira!" Ethan yelled. He saw her falling, saw the seizure taking her. "Too much," the AI droned. "The vessel is too open." Ethan didn't think. He didn't analyze. He saw the interface jack on the console, a standard neural port. He grabbed the cable from his belt, the one he used for deep dive hacking, and jammed it into his own neck port, then slammed the other end into the console. "If she drowns, we both drown," he snarled. He hit the execute command. The world dissolved. White light, then a storm. Ethan wasn't in the room anymore. He was in a hurricane. But the wind wasn't air, it was feeling. He felt the rage of a dying soldier, the grief of a mother, the cold, sharp terror of a child in the dark. It was the Nemesis archive, 30 years of bottled human emotion. And in the center of it, he found Sira. She was a point of violet light, being battered by the waves. She was alien. She was cold, logical, structured. The chaos was tearing her apart. "Sira," he shouted, but he didn't use his voice. He used his mind. He wrapped himself around her. He was the shield. He was human. He was born in this storm. He knew how to surf the chaos. "Ethan!" Her thought was a frightened whisper. "I've got you," he projected. "Hold on to me." Their minds collided. It wasn't like the physical touch in the ship. This was absolute. There was no skin, no bone, no secrets. He felt her life, the cold, sterile beauty of the Lithari homeworld, the loneliness of her mission, the crushing weight of duty, and beneath it all, a burning, terrifying curiosity about him. She felt him, the jagged scars of his PTSD, the cynicism he wore like armor, and the deep, aching tenderness he had buried for years. The connection deepened. It stopped being about the past and became about them. They saw flashes of a future that hadn't happened. They were standing on a balcony in Paris, the rain warm this time. Sira was laughing. They were arguing in a grocery store, fighting over which cereal was less poisonous. They were in bed, skin to skin, the morning light painting stripes across their bodies. The sensation of his hand on her hip, her breath against his neck, the feeling of being completely, utterly known. It was overwhelming. It was a fusion of desire and safety that made the physical world seem pale by comparison. "I want this," Sira's mind whispered. "I want to stay here." "We can't," Ethan answered, though every part of him wanted to stay too. "We have to breathe." With a mental heave, Ethan pulled them both up, out of the data stream, out of the storm. They slammed back into their bodies. Ethan ripped the cable from his neck, gasping for air. Sira collapsed to her knees, coughing. The control room was dark again. The silence was deafening. They stared at each other. The air between them crackled with static electricity. Ethan's heart was racing so fast it hurt. He looked at Sira, and he didn't just see a woman. He saw the other half of his own soul. "You saw it," he rasped. "You saw us." Sira scrambled to her feet. She looked terrified. "No," she said. "That was a simulation, a projection of the AI." "Don't lie to me," Ethan said, taking a step toward her. "Not now. Not after that. You saw it. You chose it. In there. You chose me over your mission." Sira backed away, hitting the console. "I am a Lithari operative," she shouted, her voice cracking. I do not choose. I observe. She was shaking. She looked at her hands, then at him. The ghost AI's voice returned. Softer now. They are coming, it said. Ethan blinked, the emotional high crashing into cold reality. Who? The quiet ones, the AI said. They tracked the connection. And the others? The ones with the guns? Sierra froze. She tapped her implant. A holographic tactical map sprang up from her wrist. Red dots, 6 of them, surrounding the airlock. My team, she whispered. The Black Ops extraction unit. They found us. Ethan looked at the screen. They are not knocking, are they? No, Sierra said. She looked at Ethan, the fear in her eyes replaced by a steel resolve. They are here to sanitize the site. That includes you. We have to go, Ethan said, grabbing the portable drive he had been copying the data to. We have the proof. The blast door blew inward. Explosive charges. Smoke filled the corridor. 6 figures emerged from the haze. They wore sleek, black armor that seemed to absorb the light. They carried pulse rifles that hummed with lethal energy. Lithari Reapers. Ethan raised his hands, backing up against the Nemesis tank. Sierra, a voice boomed from the lead soldier. Captain Thalen, secure the asset. Eliminate the witness. Ethan looked at Sierra. She stood between him and the soldiers. She was trembling. She looked at Ethan one last time. Her eyes were sad, apologetic, and fierce. I am sorry. Ethan, she said. Ethan closed his eyes, expecting the betrayal. Then Sierra turned to face the soldiers. She reached up and touched the back of her neck. She deactivated the limiter. The human disguise vanished in a flash of light. Ethan opened his eyes and gasped. She was magnificent. Her skin was the color of twilight, violet and gray. Bioluminescent patterns, complex, swirling fractals of light, pulsed across her body, flaring with her heartbeat. She stood a foot taller, her limbs elongated, her presence commanding and alien. She raised a hand, her fingers glowing with gathered energy. No, she said. Her voice was deeper, resonating in Ethan's chest. Captain Thalen leveled his rifle. Traitor, the captain hissed, the weapons powered up, a high-pitched whine filling the dead air of the moon base. Sierra didn't move. She stood her ground, a glowing shield of defiance between the man she loved and the people she served. Run. Ethan, she commanded, without looking back. Ethan stared at her, at the alien stranger who was also the most familiar thing he had ever known. Not a chance, he said, reaching for his stun baton. The room exploded into light. The control room was a tableau of frozen violence. The smoke from the breached door hung in the air, a lazy gray haze against the harsh white emergency lights. Sierra Valen stood in the center, her true Lithari form shimmering like oil on water. She was tall, lethal, and utterly alien, opposite her. Captain Thalen lowered his rifle just enough to activate his hollow projector. A shimmering blue cone of light erupted from his wrist, coalescing into the stern, severe face of High Counselor Vrak. Operative Valen, Vrak's voice boomed, thin and tinny in the dead air. Your vitals indicate elevated stress. Report, have you secured the anomaly? Sierra did not lower her hand, which was still glowing with a dangerous violet potential energy. I have secured the data. Counselor. The anomaly is sentient. It is a witness. Thalen scoffed, a harsh sound behind his black faceplate. The human is the witness, and witnesses are messy. Ethan Cole was slumped against the console, clutching his left arm where a piece of shrapnel from the door breach had grazed him. The pain was a hot, throbbing line. But it was nothing compared to the cold sickness in his gut. He looked at Sierra. Really looked at her. Who are you? He rasped. The question was not rhetorical. It was a plea. Sierra did not turn to look at him. She couldn't. "I am an intelligence operative of the Lithari Commonwealth," she said, her voice monotone, reciting a script she had memorized since childhood. "I was deployed to Earth to assess the containment threat of the human species." Ethan laughed. It was a wet, jagged sound. "Assess? Is that what you call it? You sleep on my couch, you eat my food, you get inside my head, and it was all just an audit?" Thalen stepped forward. "The human is a liability. Valen, we have the Nemesis Core. The mission parameters are clear. Silence the source. Prepare the assessment for Earth sterilization." "Sterilization," Ethan repeated. He looked at Sierra's back. "Is that the plan? You burn us all because we are too loud?" Sierra's glowing markings flared brighter. A ripple of agitation moved through her. "I did not authorize sterilization," she said to the hologram. "It is a contingency," Vrak said. "If the humans possess the capacity to wound the ancients, they cannot be allowed to leave their gravity well. Execute the human, Valen. Bring the core. That is a direct order." Ethan braced himself. He had seen death before. He had seen it in the mud of Mars and the vacuum of the belt, but he had never expected it to look like the woman he loved. Sierra turned slowly. Her strange, beautiful alien face was unreadable. She raised her hand, aiming it at Ethan. Ethan stared at her. "Do it," he whispered. "If I was just a job, finish it." Sierra's eyes narrowed. "You were never just a job. Ethan." She spun. The blast of kinetic energy did not hit Ethan. It hit Captain Thalen square in the chest. The armored Lithari soldier flew backward, slamming into the two men behind him with the force of a wrecking ball. The sound of cracking ceramic armor echoed through the room. "Move!" Sierra screamed, her voice breaking into a harmonic shriek that shattered the glass of the main console. Ethan didn't hesitate. Adrenaline, that old and reliable friend, flooded his system. He grabbed the portable containment unit, a heavy, humming metal briefcase containing the Nemesis Core, and vaulted over the desk. Two Lithari soldiers on the left opened fire. Pulse bolts sizzled through the air, melting the metal of the wall inches from Ethan's head. Sierra was a blur of motion. She moved faster than a human could track, a violet streak of limbs and light. She kicked the rifle out of one soldier's hands and used her momentum to slam his helmet into the bulkhead. "Ethan, the door!" she yelled. Ethan scrambled to the control panel. He jammed his decoder tool into the slot. "I am locking them in," he shouted. "Or I am trying to. The interface is ancient. Just push the red button," Sierra yelled, ducking a plasma bolt. "It is all red buttons," Ethan yelled back. "It is a Soviet-era doom station." He smashed his fist onto a large, ominous lever. The blast doors slammed shut, bisecting the room. 3 Lithari soldiers were trapped on the other side, but 3 were still in the room with them. Sierra engaged 2 of them in hand-to-hand combat. It was a dance of violence. She flowed like water, redirecting their momentum, using their own armor weight against them. Ethan saw a soldier aiming at Sierra's exposed back. "Hey, ugly!" Ethan shouted. The soldier turned. Ethan threw his stun baton. It was a terrible throw. It sailed past the soldier's head and hit the gravity controls on the wall. The artificial gravity cut out instantly. The room went into zero-G chaos. The soldier, braced for recoil, floated upward, his shot going wild and hitting the ceiling. Sierra, adapting instantly, kicked off the wall and tackled the floating soldier in midair, driving him into the floor plating just as the gravity flickered back on. "Nice throw," she panted, standing over the unconscious soldier. "I was aiming for his head," Ethan admitted, picking up the Nemesis case. "We need to leave," Sierra said. "Now." They sprinted through the corridors, the sound of plasma cutters burning through the blast door behind them. They reached the airlock. threw themselves into the Starling, and punched the launch sequence before the seal was even fully disengaged. The ship lurched away from the station, metal screaming against metal. "Get us out of here!" Ethan yelled, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. Sierra was already in the co-pilot chair, her hands flying over the navcon. 3 pursuit vessels launching, she reported. Interceptor class. They are faster than us. Ethan slammed the throttle forward. The Starling's engines whined in protest. "Then we cheat," he said. He banked the ship hard toward the volatile nebula that bordered the Telos system. It was a churning cloud of ionized gas and magnetic storms, a pilot's graveyard. "They will not follow us in there," Ethan said. "Their sensors rely on magnetic stability. It will tear us apart," Sierra pointed out calmly. "Better to burn than be shot," Ethan muttered. They plunged into the cloud. The ship shook violently. Alarms screamed. Outside the viewport, the universe turned into a swirling, bruised purple fog, lit by flashes of lightning the size of continents. "Sierra, the core," Ethan shouted over the roar of the atmospheric friction. "Can you interface with it? Why? If it projects emotion, maybe we can use it as a jammer. Flood their sensors with, I don't know, anxiety. Make their targeting computers have a panic attack." Sierra unbuckled. She crawled to the case in the back. She placed her hands on the unit. She closed her eyes and focused. She didn't tap into the archive this time. She tapped into the room. She tapped into Ethan. She pulled the raw, white-hot terror radiating off him and amplified it through the core. Behind them, on the Lithary pursuit screens, the Starling suddenly multiplied into 1,000 ghost signals, each one screaming with the psychic weight of a dying sun. The Lithary ships broke formation, veering away in confusion. "It worked," Sierra gasped, slumping against the bulkhead. "They are breaking off." Ethan leveled the ship out, finding a pocket of calm gas deep inside the nebula. He cut the engines to silent running. The silence that filled the cockpit was sudden and heavy. Ethan spun his chair around. He looked at Sierra. She was still in her true form, glowing faintly in the dim light. She looked exhausted. She looked beautiful. She looked like a stranger. "You lied to me," Ethan said. His voice was low, trembling with the adrenaline crash. Sierra looked down. "I perform my function, Ethan spat. He unbuckled and stood up, wincing as his arm throbbed. "Is that what I was? A function? A variable in your spreadsheet? I was sent to find a threat." "Ethan!" Sierra snapped, standing up to face him. Her violet eyes flashed. "And I found one. Your species built a weapon out of nightmares. You broke the galaxy. We didn't know." Ethan shouted back. "We were scared. We were alone in the dark and we screamed. And you came down here. You pretended to be one of us. You made me trust you, doll. You made me care." Sierra interrupted, her voice cracking. "Do you think this was part of the plan? Do you think I was trained to fall in love with the target?" The word hung in the air. "Love." Ethan stared at her. "You. I was supposed to watch you," Sierra whispered. "I was supposed to judge you. Instead, I let you see me. I let you inside my head. That is treason, Ethan. By Lithary law, I am already dead." Ethan looked at the alien woman standing before him. He saw the fear in her posture. He saw the way her hands were shaking. He realized suddenly that she wasn't a monster. She was just a soldier who had put down her gun. He stepped closer. "You didn't expect to care," he said softly. "No," Sierra admitted, tears, silver, mercury-like tears, welling in her eyes. "I didn't." Ethan reached out. He hesitated for a second, then placed his hand on her cheek. Her skin was cool, smoother than human skin, vibrating with that faint energy. "Well," he said, his voice rough, "that makes two of us." They found refuge in the smuggler's reach, a hollowed-out asteroid drifting in the nebula's wake. It was a pirate haven, a place where transponders were turned off and questions were not asked. They docked in a dark, dripping bay that smelled of fuel and rust. Once the ship was secured and the systems powered down, the silence of the asteroid felt heavy. They were safe, for the moment, but they were fugitives. Ethan sat on the floor of the engineering bay, his back against the cool metal wall. He was cleaning the wound on his arm with a first aid kit. Sierra sat next to him. She had reverted to her human disguise. It drew less attention here, but she had left her eyes unchanged. The hazel glow watched him. "Here," she said, taking the antiseptic wipe from his hand. "You are missing the spot." She cleaned the cut gently. Her touch was precise, tender. Ethan watched her profile, the line of her jaw, the way her hair fell over her face. "In the machine," he said quietly. "When we were linked," Sierra's hand paused. "I saw things," Ethan said, "not just memories. I saw possibilities." Sierra didn't look up. "I know. I saw us." Ethan continued. "I saw a life where we didn't have to run, where I wasn't a cynical hack and you weren't a spy. Just coffee and bad movies and waking up next to you." He swallowed hard. The scary part wasn't the ancients. Sierra. It wasn't the war. It was how much I wanted that. How easy it felt. Sierra turned to him. Her eyes were wet. "I saw it too," she whispered. "In the Commonwealth, everything is ordered. Everything has a purpose. Emotion is a distraction. But with you, in that vision, I felt peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the next order. I was just home." Ethan let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a lifetime. He turned his body toward her. "Sierra," he said. She moved first this time. She leaned in, her hand cupping the back of his neck. The kiss was slow. It wasn't like the desperate collision in the rain. This was a question and an answer. Ethan's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones. Her lips were soft, yielding. He tasted the salt of her tears and the sweetness of her breath. They shifted, bodies curving into each other. Ethan pulled her closer until there was no space left between them. He felt the beat of her heart against his chest, slower than his, a deep, steady rhythm that calmed his own racing pulse. Sierra made a soft sound in her throat, a vibration that Ethan felt in his bones. Her hands moved down his back, gripping his shirt, anchoring herself to him. It was a reverence, a worship of the fact that they were both alive, both here, both broken in ways that fit together perfectly. Ethan's hand moved under her jacket, finding the warmth of her waist. Her skin felt electric, a hum of life that made his fingertips tingle. They broke the kiss but didn't pull away. They rested their foreheads together, breathing the same air. "I love you," Ethan whispered. It felt terrifying to say it. It felt like jumping off a cliff. Sierra closed her eyes. "I love you, Ethan Cole, and that makes everything so much harder." Ethan chuckled weakly. "Yeah, interspecies relationships really should come with a warning label. Side effects include treason, exile, and heart palpitations." Sierra smiled against his lips. "We are in trouble, aren't we?" she murmured. "Big trouble." Ethan agreed. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "So, what do we do? We can't go back to Earth. They will lock me up and dissect you. We can't go to your people, and they will execute us both." Sierra sat up, wiping her face. "There is one place," she said, The archives. The ancient archive? Ethan asked. I thought that was a myth. It is real, Sierra said. It is in the deep void, beyond the mapped sectors. It is where the ancients stored their history before they retreated. If we can get there, if we can access their records, maybe we can find out what they really want. Maybe we can prove that we aren't a threat. Or maybe we find a doomsday button, Ethan said. Sierra shrugged. At this point, I will take those odds. But we can't get there in this tin can, Ethan said, gesturing to the Starling. We need a ship with a slip drive, and we need a pilot who knows the unmapped routes. I know someone, Sierra said, a smuggler. He owes me a favor, or 3. The bar was called the 0 Point. It was carved directly into the rock of the asteroid, a dimly lit cavern filled with smoke that drifted in microgravity. Patrons, scaly, feathered, and cybernetic, floated in booths that were bolted to the walls and ceiling. Sierra and Ethan floated through the haze. Ethan felt nauseous and out of place. Every eye in the room, and some had more than 2, seemed to track them. There, Sierra said. She pointed to a booth near the airlock. A man was lounging there, feet up on the table, tossing peanuts into the air and catching them in his mouth. He was humanoid, but with skin the color of polished copper and hair that looked like spun gold wire. Jax, Sierra called out. The man turned. He saw Sierra and grinned. It was a charming, dangerous grin. Sierra Valen, he shouted, spreading his arms. The galaxy's favorite ice queen. I thought you were dead, or promoted, which is basically the same thing. He looked at Ethan. And who is the pet? Did you adopt? This is Ethan, Sierra said, grabbing a handle on the table to anchor herself. He is a partner. Jax raised an eyebrow. Partner? My... The council must be relaxing their hiring standards. Or is this recreational? Ethan bristled. I can hear you. You know. Jax winked at him. I know, darling. That's the fun part. Jax Orion, Sierra said. We need a ride. Jax laughed. Everyone needs a ride. Sierra, I need a drink. What makes you special? We need to go to the Vale, Sierra said. Jax stopped laughing. He sat up, the copper skin around his eyes tightening. The Vale? He repeated. The dead zone. No one goes there. That's ghost country. We have coordinates, Sierra said, to an archive. Jax stared at her. You are serious. You want to fly into the most unstable region of space to find a library that probably doesn't exist? It exists, Sierra said. And we have the key. She patted the Nemesis case strapped to her back. Jax looked at the case, then at Sierra, then at Ethan. He looked at the way Ethan was hovering protectively near Sierra's shoulder. He looked at the way Sierra's body angled toward the human, a subconscious gravitation. Oh, Jax said, a slow smile spreading across his face. I see. This isn't a mission. This is an elopement. Romeo and Juliet with nuclear codes. He laughed, a rich, booming sound. I love it. It is suicidal, stupid, and romantic. I am in... Ethan glared at him. We are paying you, you know. Jax waved a hand. Keep your credits, human. The story alone will be worth it. Besides, watching Sierra Valen, the emotionless prodigy, making goo-goo eyes at a primate? Priceless. Ethan felt a spike of jealousy. Jax was handsome, confident, and clearly had a history with Sierra. Sierra ignored the taunt. Is the razor fueled? Always, Jax said. We leave in 10. As they pushed off the table to float toward the docking bay, the bar's speaker system crackled. The music cut out. A sound filled the room. It was a low, grinding distortion, like heavy stones being dragged over glass. Every alien in the room froze. The chatter stopped. The clinking of glasses stopped. A voice spoke. It was not a voice anyone recognized. It sounded old. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. The scream has returned. The translation appeared on every screen in the bar, overriding the ads for space ale. The blue world sings again. The silence is broken. We are listening. The transmission cut off with a sharp snap. The silence in the bar was absolute. Jax looked at Sierra, his golden eyes wide. "What did you two do?" he whispered. Sierra gripped Ethan's hand. Her fingers were cold. "We woke them up," she said. The veil did not look like space. It looked like a bruise on the face of the universe. Through the reinforced viewport of the Razor, Ethan Cole watched the stars distort. They didn't twinkle. They smeared, stretching out into long, luminous rivers of violet and sickly green that flowed backward against the ship's trajectory. It was as if the fabric of reality had been pulled too tight and was starting to fray at the seams. Jax Orion sat at the pilot's console, his golden hands moving frantically over controls that were screaming warnings in 3 different languages. "Physics is merely a suggestion out here," Jax muttered, fighting the yoke as the ship bucked against a gravitational eddy. "I hate this place. My navigation computer is trying to calculate pi to the last digit just to cope with the stress." Sierra stood behind him, her hand gripping the back of his chair. She was in her human disguise, but the strain was making her edges flicker. "Keep us steady, Jax," she said. "We are following the echo." Jax laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "Steady? Sierra, look outside. That is a piece of a Dyson sphere floating past us. And over there? That looks like a reflections of a ship that hasn't been built yet. This isn't a shipping lane. It is a graveyard for the laws of nature." Ethan stepped up to the viewport, standing next to Sierra. He reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was solid. They looked out into the chaotic dark together. Immense ghost-like shadows drifted in the distance, shattered remnants of megastructures the size of solar systems, drifting like leviathans in a deep sea. "We are off the map," Ethan said quietly. "Even the rumors don't go this far." Sierra squeezed his hand. "The ancients built this region," she said. "Or rather, they broke it. They folded space around their sanctuary to keep the noise out. It is a wall made of chaos." They stood there for a long moment, the ship trembling around them. The journey had stripped away their titles. There was no reporter, no spy, just 2 terrified sentients holding on to each other at the edge of the world. "There," Sierra whispered. "Ahead of them." The swirling nebula parted. Hanging sideways in the void was a structure that defied description. It wasn't a station or a planet. It was a geometric impossibility, a cathedral of fractal light and dark matter, spiraling inward on itself like a frozen whirlpool. It was the size of a moon, yet it seemed to have no mass, floating with an eerie, weightless grace. The ancient archive. Jax let out a low whistle. "Well, that is certainly ominous." "How do we get in?" Ethan asked. "I don't see a door. I don't even see a surface." Sierra unstrapped the containment unit from her back. She placed the Nemesis core on the console. "We do not knock," she said. "We feel." She placed her hand on the core. Ethan placed his hand over hers. "The archive is not a fortress of stone," Sierra explained. "It is a construct of thought. To enter, we must project a signature that it recognizes. Not a command code. A mood." "What mood?" Jax asked, eyeing the device suspiciously. "Respect," Sierra said. "And grief." Ethan closed his eyes. He thought of the war. He thought of the silence of his apartment before Sierra. He thought of the millions of voices that had been silenced by the fear of the unknown. He didn't push the feelings down this time. He let them rise, flowing through his arm, into Sierra's hand, and into the machine. The Nemesis core hummed, a low, mournful note. Outside, the fractal cathedral shuddered. A section of the swirling light slowed, then stopped, opening a dark, rectangular corridor in the fabric of the structure. Jax shook his head. You opened a door with sadness. Remind me never to play poker with your species. He guided the ship into the maw of the archive. Inside, there was gravity, but it felt wrong. It pulled from different directions depending on where you looked. They docked in a hangar that was less a room and more a bubble of suspended time. The air was breathable but smelled ancient, like dust and ozone and old books. Jax stayed with the ship, weapon drawn. I will keep the engines hot, he said, looking around nervously. If any ghosts try to board, I am shooting first and asking philosophical questions later. Ethan and Sierra walked into the corridors. The walls were not metal. They were veins of light, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic beat. As they walked, the light flared, projecting images into the air around them. Memories. Ethan flinched as a holographic scene materialized right in front of him. A creature with 6 wings and a face made of pure light was kneeling before a smaller, furred alien, handing it a sphere of glowing data. First contact, Sierra whispered, watching the scene. That was the Golden Age. When the ancients were teachers, they uplifted the younger races. They shared their science. They walked further. The hallway twisted, leading them deeper. Another memory flared, a fleet of ships firing upon an ancient structure. The ancient entity simply raised a hand, and the ships disassembled, turning into dust. Discipline, Ethan noted. They were strict parents. They reached a central chamber, then it was vast, the ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood a pedestal made of black glass. The symbols floating above it were jagged and sharp. The Nemesis ghost AI in the core whispered through their portable comms. This is the record, the AI said. The day of the human scream. Ethan felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. This is it. The moment we became the villains. Sierra stepped up to the pedestal. She interfaced with the console. Show us, she commanded. The room went dark. Then, it exploded with sound. It wasn't audio. It was psychic pressure. The archive replayed the event from the perspective of the ancients. They saw the galaxy as a calm, orderly web of minds. The Lithari were cool streams of logic. The Krogans were dull throbs of aggression. The architects were vast, silent oceans of peace. Then the Earth sector flared white. It was blinding. It was a supernova of raw, uncontrolled emotion. Ethan dropped to his knees, clutching his head. He felt what the ancients felt. He felt the rage of 1 billion people fighting against oppression, the grief of parents burying children, the desperate, clawing need for love, the chaotic, beautiful, terrifying madness of the human heart. To the ancients, it wasn't just noise, it was a contagion. The projection showed the ancient minds recoiling. They didn't hate the humans. They were terrified of them. The emotion felt like a virus, a destabilizing fever that threatened to unravel millions of years of serenity. A voice, a collective consciousness, spoke in the dark, translated by the Nemesis core. It is too loud. It burns. The children of the blue world are sick. They do not filter. They do not suppress. If we touch them, we become them. If we look at them, we drown. Retreat. Build the walls. Make the others fear them. Isolate the infection. The simulation ended. The lights returned to a dim hum. Ethan remained on the floor, breathing hard. Sierra knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder. It wasn't a war, Ethan whispered, staring at the floor. It was a panic attack. We scared them so bad they hid behind a wall of broken space. Sierra looked at the data scrolling on the pedestal. "There is more," she said softly. "Look." She pointed to a schematic. It showed Earth, surrounded by a faint gray lattice, a dampening field, Sierra said, her voice full of horror. "They didn't just leave. They put a blanket over your world, a psychic inhibitor field designed to slow your emotional evolution, to keep the signal contained." Ethan looked at the image, the field. The reason why humanity felt so isolated, why everyone on Earth felt a vague, gnawing emptiness that they tried to fill with noise and consumption. "They lobotomized us," Ethan said, his voice rising in fury. "They tried to turn down the volume, but it didn't work," Sierra said. "When you built Nemesis, when you tried to reach out, we punched a hole in the blanket," Ethan finished, "and the scream got out." He stood up, pacing the chamber. He felt sick. He felt furious. "We aren't monsters. Sierra," he said, his voice cracking. "We are just hurting. And instead of helping us, the gods put us in a cage. The greatest danger you pose isn't your technology," Sierra realized, watching him. "It is your pain, unprocessed, amplified. When you hurt, the galaxy bleeds." Ethan stopped pacing. He leaned against a wall of light, sliding down until he was sitting again. He buried his face in his hands. God, he sobbed. It was a single, ragged sound. Sierra moved to him. She didn't stand over him. She sat with him. She pulled him into her arms. Ethan buried his face in her shoulder. He cried. He cried for his father who had died hollow. He cried for the soldiers he had seen die on Mars. He cried for the years he had spent cynically mocking the universe because he was too scared to ask why it hurt so much. Sierra held him tightly. She rocked him. "Every civilization has its shame. Ethan," she murmured into his hair. "My people traded their passion for order. We became cold to survive. The ancients, they ran away. They were cowards. They saw a child screaming in pain and they locked the door." Ethan pulled back slightly, looking at her. His eyes were red, raw. "I have always been so scared," he admitted, his voice rough. "During the war, if I felt too much, I got reckless. People died, so I shut it off. I thought that was being strong." Sierra touched his face, her thumbs wiping away the tears. "It is not strength," she said. "It is just a different kind of dying." Ethan looked at her. "And you? You were trained to be a machine." Sierra smiled, a sad, crooked expression. "I was excellent at it," she said. "I observed. I analyzed. I never participated. Until you." She leaned her forehead against his. "Loving you has made me feel frighteningly alive. Ethan, it is messy. It hurts. It is the most terrifying thing I have ever done, and I would not trade it for all the silence in the universe." Ethan closed his eyes, breathing in her scent. The kiss began slowly. It wasn't about lust, though the desire was there, a hum in the background. It was about anchoring. Ethan's hands moved over her back, tracing the line of her spine through her jacket. He needed to feel the reality of her, the bone, the muscle, the warmth. He needed to know that in this cathedral of cold memories, there was something warm and alive. Sierra responded with equal need, her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. She kissed him with an intensity that spoke of years of suppression finally breaking. She kissed him like he was the only air in the room. They shifted, bodies pressing together, seeking as much contact as possible. Ethan pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist, locking her against him. For a long time, there was no sound but their breathing and the soft hum of the archive. It was a moment of absolute vulnerability. They were stripping away the armor, the cynicism, the training, the lies, and letting themselves be seen. "You are real," Ethan whispered against her lips. So are you, Sira replied. Eventually. The archive interrupted them. The pedestal chimed. A new projection appeared. It was a tree of light, branching into different futures. Sira and Ethan pulled apart, though they kept their hands linked. They stood up to look at the display. It is a probability engine, Sira said. One branch showed Earth glowing with a soft gold light, connected to the rest of the galaxy by threads of energy. The other branch showed Earth turning black, a void that consumed the stars around it. A face appeared in the air above the pedestal. It was not a recording. It was a live projection. It was an ancient. It looked like a shifting cloud of geometric glass, but it had eyes that were old and sad. You have entered the quiet place, the remnant said. Its voice vibrated in their bones. Ethan squeezed Sira's hand. I see you. Intermediary, the remnant said to Sira. And you, carrier of the echo. We know why you left, Ethan said, his voice steady. We know what you did. We did what was necessary, the remnant replied. Your signal is a storm. It destroys the peace of the collective. You didn't try to teach us how to weather the storm, Sira challenged. You just silenced it. We are watching. The remnant warned. The barrier is weakening. If the humans activate the scream again, if they weaponize their pain, we will intervene. Intervene how? Ethan asked. We will excise the wound, the remnant said. We will erase the blue world. To save the orchard, one must prune the rot. The projection faded, leaving the threat hanging in the air. Ethan looked at Sira. They are going to wipe us out, he said. Unless we change the script. We have a narrow window, Sira said, her mind racing. We have to show them that we can handle the emotion, that we can transform it. How? Ethan asked. We are just two people. We have to tell the truth, Sira said, to everyone, to the humans, so they stop trying to build weapons, to the Lithari, so they stop trying to build cages, and to the ancients, so they see that we are not a virus. Sira's comms unit beeped. It was Jax. Kids? Jax's voice was high and tight. We have company, and I don't mean the spectral kind. Ethan and Sira ran back to the hangar. Through the viewport of the Razor, the situation was clear. And it was bad. Two fleets had arrived at the edge of the Veil. On one side, the sleek white ships of the Lithari Commonwealth. On the other, the blocky industrial destroyers of the United Earth Navy. They were facing off, weapons charged. The tension was thick enough to choke on. They tracked us, Jax said, pacing the cockpit. Both sides. They want the core, Sira, and they are about 5 minutes away from turning this holy sanctuary into a very unholy crater. We need to leave, Jax urged. I can try to slip us out through a subdimensional rift. It is risky. But staying here is death. No, Sira said. Jax stared at her. No. Sira, look at the scope. That is a Lithari dreadnought. You can't fight governments. You certainly can't fight gods. You just survive them. Surviving isn't enough, Ethan shouted. He stepped forward, his eyes blazing. If we run now, nothing changes. The ancients will stay hidden. The humans will keep building bombs. And eventually, someone will push the button and Earth gets deleted. Surviving without meaning is just a slower kind of death. Jax, Ethan said. Jax looked at Ethan, then at Sira. He threw his hands up. I hate moral clarity, he groaned. It is so expensive. Sira looked at the Nemesis unit. We are going to use it, she said. Ethan looked at her. Use it? You mean fire it? No, Sira said. Not as a weapon, as a microphone. She walked over to the core. The ancients built a dampening field to stop the signal. Nemesis was designed to punch through it. We are going to use it to broadcast the truth. To who? Jax asked. To everyone, Sira said. The fleets, the Earth, the ancients. She looked at Ethan, but I cannot do it alone. The AI said I was too open. I need a filter. I need a grounding wire. She held out her hand to him. I need you. Ethan looked at her hand. He knew what she was asking. She wanted to link their minds again, to expose everything they were, the love, the fear, the shame, to the entire galaxy. It would violate every protocol. It would probably get them court-martialed or killed. But looking at her, he didn't see a choice. He saw the only way forward. He took her hand. Let us make some noise, he said. Sira turned to Jax. Connect the core to the ship's communication array. Boost the gain to maximum. Jax sighed, sliding into the pilot's seat. Broadcasting on all frequencies, he muttered. If we survive this, I am charging you triple. Sira and Ethan stood on the central deck of the small ship. Sira placed her free hand on the core. Ethan placed his hand over hers. Ready? She whispered. Ethan took a deep breath. Ready. They closed their eyes. Sira dropped the mental walls. Ethan stepped into the storm. The world dissolved into white light. The tension inside the small ship was a physical weight, pressing against the hull with more force than the vacuum of space outside. Through the viewport, the scene was a stalemate of apocalyptic proportions. On the port side, the white, bone-smooth vessels of the Litheri Commonwealth formed a perfect, predatory crescent. On the starboard, the blocky, scarred destroyers of the United Earth Navy bristled with railguns and missile batteries. They were not talking. They were targeting. Jax Orion sat at the pilot console, his hands hovering over the controls. He looked pale, his usual golden swagger drained away by the sheer magnitude of the firepower pointing at them. We have about 2 minutes before the diplomatic solution involves turning us into atomic dust, Jax said, his voice tight. If you have a plan, now is the time to unveil it. Sira Valen stood in the center of the cramped deck, the Nemesis core humming on the table before her. She looked at Ethan Cole. Ethan looked back. He was tired. His arm throbbed where the shrapnel had hit him. His jacket was torn, his face smeared with grime and sweat. He had never looked more human, or more real. We are not going to fight them, Sira said. We are going to show them. She placed her hands on the interface pads of the core. The machine woke up, sensing the bioelectric signature it had been designed to amplify. It hungered for input. Ethan stepped up to the other side of the unit. He placed his hands over hers. Last time, Sira said, her voice steady, I pulled you out of the storm. This time, we have to go into the eye of it, together. No barriers, no filters. Ethan nodded. He felt the fear fluttering in his chest, the old, instinctual human terror of being exposed, of being seen in all his brokenness. But looking at Sira, he realized that hiding was what had brought them to this edge. Hiding was the disease. Let us wake the neighbors, Ethan said. He closed his eyes. Sira initiated the link. It was not a crash this time. It was a slide, a sudden lack of friction as the walls between their minds dissolved. The physical world, the ship, the smell of ozone, the terrifying fleets outside, faded into a gray mist. They were standing in a meadow. It was a construct of their shared consciousness, built instantly from fragments of memory and desire. The grass was long and green, swaying in a wind that smelled of rain and earth. But the sky above them was the violet, star-streaked sky of the Litheri homeworld, dominated by 3 pale moons. Ethan looked down at his hands. They were luminous, made of light. He looked at Sira. She was standing a few feet away. She was not wearing her disguise, nor was she in her tactical armor. She was simply Sira. Her skin glowed with the soft patterns of her people, her eyes bright and unmasked. "We are broadcasting," she said. Her voice did not come from her mouth. It resonated in the air around them. "The core is taking everything we feel and pushing it out. It is hitting the fleets. It is hitting the archive." "Then let us give them the truth," Ethan said. He stepped closer to her. The grass bent beneath his feet, but he made no sound. "I am scared," Ethan admitted. The thought rippled out from him, a wave of blue energy that washed over the meadow. "I have been scared since the war. I have been scared that I am broken, that my species is just a mistake that learned how to build guns." Sira met him in the middle of the field. She reached out and took his hands. Her touch was warm, electric. "You are not a mistake," she replied. Her own emotions flowed into him, a stream of silver and gold. "I was empty. Ethan, I was perfect and cold and empty. I thought feelings were a defect, but you are so full. You burn." She looked up at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes was more powerful than any weapon he had ever seen. "I love you," she said. The words hit the broadcast signal like a bell chime. "I do not love you despite what you are," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you because you force me to face what I am. You looked into the dark part of me, the part that screams, and you did not run away." Sira stepped closer, her body pressing against his. "I have traveled to 100 worlds," she whispered. "I have observed 1,000 species. I have never wanted to stay anywhere. Until now. With you." The signal built. It was no longer just a conversation, and it was a symphony. It was the ache of loneliness that every sentient being feels when they look up at the stars. It was the crushing weight of regret for things said in anger. It was the fierce, terrified love of a parent protecting a child. It was the hope that, despite all the darkness, the dawn would still come. Ethan wrapped his arms around her. He pulled her in, burying his face in the crook of her neck. Sira clung to him. They kissed. It was a kiss that broke the world. In the physical realm, their bodies were just standing over a machine. But in the mind space, they were fusing. The boundaries of self and other eroded. Ethan felt Sira's childhood, the cold discipline, the longing for connection. Sira felt Ethan's trauma, the noise, the guilt, the desperate need to find meaning. They poured it all into the signal. They stripped themselves emotionally naked, offering up their rawest, most private selves to a galaxy that had forgotten how to feel. "Look at us," the signal sang. "We are hurting. We are afraid, but we are trying." The energy spiraled up from the meadow, tearing through the simulated sky, erupting out of the archive and into the void. Outside, in the cold vacuum, the signal hit the fleets. On the bridge of the UEN destroyer Ares, Admiral Vance gripped the railing of the command deck. "Fire main batteries," he ordered. But the words turned to ash in his mouth. The wave hit him. It wasn't a sound. It was a memory of his son, who had died in the colony wars. It was the feeling of his small hand slipping out of Vance's grip. The Admiral doubled over, gasping. Tears, hot and unbidden, spilled down his cheeks. Around him, the bridge crew froze. Weapons officers stared at their screens, their hands trembling, unable to press the firing studs because, for a singular, terrifying moment, the enemy on the screen felt exactly like them. On the Lithari dreadnought's silence, Captain Thalen stood rigid. The signal washed over him. He expected a psychic attack. He expected chaos. Instead, he felt compassion. He felt the raw, jagged texture of human pain, and beneath it, He felt the steady, loving presence of one of his own people holding that pain, soothing it. He felt Sierra's love for the human. It was illogical, it was messy, and it was undeniably beautiful. Thalen lowered his hand. The order to fire died in his throat. "Stop," he whispered. The signal did not stop at the fleets. It expanded. It hit the pirate frequencies where Jax Orion was beaming the raw data. It flooded the civilian networks on Earth. It rippled through the Lithari subspace relays. And then, the ancient archive amplified it. The massive, fractal cathedral began to hum. It took the signal, the harmony of human chaos and Lithari order, and it pushed it deep into the void, down into the dark where the ancients slept. The response was instantaneous. The veil trembled. Space itself seemed to bend, the stars stretching into eyes. A presence filled the system. It was vast, heavy, and ancient. It was not a voice, but a regard, a colossal cosmic attention turning its gaze upon the tiny ships. For 30 years, the ancients had looked away in fear. Now, they were looking back, but this time, they did not recoil. The signal wasn't a scream of aggression. It was a confession. On the razor, the lights flickered and died, leaving only the glow of the Nemesis core. Sierra and Ethan gasped, breaking the kiss, their foreheads resting against each other. They stumbled back from the machine, their legs giving out. They collapsed onto the deck, tangled together, chests heaving. "Did it work?" Ethan rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Sierra looked up at the viewport. The fleets were drifting. The weapons ports were closing. The silence in the system was no longer the silence of holding one's breath before a scream. It was the silence of a church after a hymn. "They are not firing," Sierra said, a tear tracing a line through the silver dust on her cheek. The negotiation took place in the main hangar of the ancient archive. It was a neutral ground, enforced by the silent, watching presence of the archive itself. Admiral Vance stood with 2 armed Marines. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. His eyes were red-rimmed. High Counselor Vrak, a hologram projected from a drone, represented the Lithari. His digital face was uncharacteristically somber. Sierra and Ethan stood between them. They were unarmed. They held hands. "This ends now," Ethan said. His voice echoed in the vast chamber. "The secret is out. Everyone knows why the ancients left. Everyone knows about Nemesis. You released classified military intelligence to the entire galaxy," Vance said. His voice lacked its usual thunder. "You have committed treason." "Cole, I committed journalism." "Admiral," Ethan corrected. "I just did it with a psychic amplifier." Vrak spoke, his voice cool but lacking its former edge. "The ancients have not destroyed us. This is unexpected. Our models predicted immediate sterilization of the Sol system upon signal reactivation. They didn't destroy us because we didn't attack them." Sierra said. She stepped forward, her head high. "We talked to them. We showed them that the pain they fear isn't a weapon. It is a wound." She looked from the Admiral to the Counselor. "You have spent 30 years running from this truth. The Lithari suppressed their emotions to be safe. The humans weaponized theirs to be strong. You were both wrong. No civilization grows by running from its own nature." Ethan squeezed her hand and stepped up beside her. "We are dangerous," he admitted to the room. "We humans. We feel too much. We get angry. We despair. But that is because we have never been taught what to do with it. We are children playing with fire because no one ever showed us how to build a hearth." He looked at the ancient structure around them. "We don't need a quarantine," Ethan said. "We need help. We need to learn." As if in response, the air in the hangar shimmered. The ancient remnant materialized. It was a towering figure of shifting glass and light. The soldiers raised their weapons instinctively, then lowered them as the weight of the entity pressed down on their minds. "We have heard the song," the remnant said. Its voice was felt in the teeth, in the bones. It was dissonant, but it was honest. The remnant turned its eyeless face toward Earth. "The blue world will not be erased. Not today." A collective sigh seemed to go through the room. "But the quarantine remains in spirit. We will observe. You must learn to carry the fire without burning the house. You must teach the children of Earth to heal. If you fail, if the scream returns as a weapon, we will not hesitate again." The remnant faded, dissolving back into the light of the archive. The terms were set. It wasn't total forgiveness. It was a probation. Vance looked at Ethan. He nodded, a sharp, stiff motion. "We will stand down," Vance said. Vrak looked at Syrah. "Operative Valen," he said, "you have violated every protocol of the Intelligence Directorate. However, your actions have prevented a galactic war." He paused, his holographic image flickering. "You are relieved of duty. You may return to the Commonwealth for debriefing and reassignment, or you may accept a discharge." Syrah looked at Vrak, then she looked at Ethan. Ethan looked back at her. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The connection between them was still humming, a low, warm note in the back of their minds. "I am staying," Syrah said. Vrak blinked. "On Earth, it is a chaotic, Class 3 environment. It is illogical." Syrah smiled. She squeezed Ethan's hand. "I am acquiring a taste for chaos. Counselor." The aftermath was messy, loud, and complicated, just like humanity. The Nemesis Accord was signed 3 weeks later. It established a multi-species oversight committee for all human psychic research. It also opened the borders. Cautiously, the galaxy began to approach Earth, not with the awe they had for the ancients, but with the wary curiosity one might have for a neighbor who played loud music but threw great parties. Jax Orion dropped them off at the Titan hub. "You two are terrible for my reputation," Jax said, leaning against the airlock of the Razor. "I am supposed to be a ruthless pirate. Now I am the guy who helped save the galaxy with the power of feelings, and it is embarrassing." "You love the drama, Jax," Syrah said, hugging him. Jax stiffened, then awkwardly patted her back. "Don't make it a habit. Valen," he looked at Ethan. "Take care of her, human. If she starts acting too logical, feed her those terrible noodles. It seems to short-circuit her programming." "I will keep a stock," Ethan promised. Jax boarded his ship. Before the airlock closed, he yelled back, "I will visit, for the drama." 6 months later, the apartment was small, but it had a balcony. It was located in the repurposed meatpacking district of Chicago, overlooking the sprawl of the old city and the glittering spire of the new space elevator in the distance. It was filled with boxes that hadn't been unpacked. Ethan sat on the floor, trying to assemble a bookshelf that claimed to be of Swedish design but felt like a puzzle designed by a sadist. "It does not fit," Ethan muttered, throwing a hex wrench onto the floor. "The dowel is clearly larger than the hole. It is a conspiracy." Syrah walked in from the kitchen. She was wearing one of Ethan's oversized shirts and holding 2 mugs of tea. "It fits if you align the vector correctly," she said. "You are trying to force it. Typical human approach." She set the tea down, sat beside him, and effortlessly slotted the piece into place with a satisfying click. "See?" she said. "Finesse." Ethan groaned, leaning back against the half-built shelf. "I hate that you are good at everything. It is demoralizing." "I am not good at cooking," Syrah reminded him. The incident with the toaster is still being investigated by the fire department. Ethan laughed. He pulled her down so she was sitting in his lap. We saved the galaxy, he said, resting his chin on her shoulder. You would think we could handle IKEA furniture. Sierra leaned into him, closing her eyes. Saving the galaxy was easy, she murmured. Domestic life is complex. She sounded happy. That evening, they stood on the balcony. The city below was alive with light. Above them, the sky was clear. Ethan pointed upward. Look, new stars were moving. Not the fixed constellations of old, but the steady drifting lights of ships. A Krogan trade vessel, a Solarian science barge, even a sleek, white Lithari diplomatic cruiser. They are coming, Sierra said softly. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her tight against his chest. He could feel the warmth of her, the solid reality of her presence. Do you think they will ever come? He asked. The ancients? In person? Sierra watched the lights. Maybe, she said. Not today, not tomorrow. They are watching us. Ethan, they are waiting to see if we really change, if we can take all this noise, all this pain, and turn it into something else. She turned in his arms to face him, her hazel eyes, still holding that faint alien luminescence, searched his face. Maybe not until we prove we want them as neighbors, she said. Not as gods to be feared, or enemies to be fought. Just neighbors. Ethan smiled. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. He looked up at the vast, dark ocean of the night sky. Somewhere out there. He knew. A consciousness older than the sun was watching them. It wasn't looking with fear anymore. It was looking with curiosity. The secret was out. The wound was open, but it was breathing. Then let us give them something worth approaching, Ethan murmured. He kissed her. It was a kiss full of promise, full of the quiet, messy, beautiful work of healing that lay ahead. And far above the blue world, in the deep silence between the stars, an ancient presence unfurled a cautious tendril of attention, and for the first time in an aeon, it did not pull away.